This is another really great chapter in the book that is also a lot of commentary on things that are going on at the time in academia, and actually, to a large extent, still going on now. Because here you have Humpty Dumpty, and he's using words in ways that they don't mean. He's just like, oh, yes, this is a great knockup. No, this is impenetrable. And impenetrable means that we're done discussing this, now we're going to move on to another topic. And so you have this question of, well, what does a word mean? And how can we discuss anything if we don't know what we're talking about? And there are a lot of arguments that go on today, and will probably be going on in 1,000 years if archaeologists ever dig up this video and watch it, that people use a word and it means two different things. And they make an argument based on the word meaning two different things. And one of the arguments is completely reasonable. And they argue their argument is nigh on insane. But you can't argue against the insane one because they'll say, oh, I mean the serious one. And if you accept them as being the serious one, they actually go off and say, oh, I really meant the insane one. And there's a whole bunch of tricks like this that kids do. It's like, oh, are you PT? And it's like, this means this. And, oh, no, it means that. And people try to be inscrutable and try to play tricks with words. And just words suck. Words are horrible, terrible things because they can mean different things. And English is particularly bad with this, even without people playing games and using different meanings. So there are two words, maybe three, that mean a word that means the opposite of itself. So you have a word that means one thing, and it also means its complete opposite. So one of the classic examples is cleave. Cleave means to stick together. It also means to split apart. So in old-fashioned language, they talk about husbands and wives cleaving to each other, being one person. They also talk about rocks cleaving and splitting apart. And you kind of have to know from context which one they mean. Recently, the dictionary adopted the word literally to mean not literally. The word literally originally meant that the definition of what is being, that the meaning of what is being said is exactly what it is. So you could say, I am literally 6 feet 4 inches tall. Because if you were to stand me up next to a ruler, I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall. But the dictionary has now said it also means figuratively, meaning that it's sort of directionally correct, but not exactly right. So you could say, I'm 20 feet tall. He's literally 20 feet tall. Well, no, it's not literally 20 feet tall. It's just really tall because 6'4" is really kind of tall. But, literally 20 feet is wrong. But the thing is the dictionary now says that literally means in a figurative, non-exact sense. So there have been times where it's like, oh, it's literally this, and I catch myself. And once I caught myself, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. It's like, it's like 20 feet or whatever. And I did the math, and it turns out that I was really actually close. It was like, oh man, it's like literally a mile away. And well, no, it wasn't literally a mile away. It was 9/10 of a mile away. And it's like, okay, it's like a mile away. Anyway, so the word that means the opposite of itself, and that is a sentence that should be taken out and shot, is contronym, where it's built on the sort of same root as synonym and antonym. Synonym is two words that mean the same. Antonym are two words that mean the opposite. Contra is against, and nym is word, so contronym, a word against itself, is it's a word that means the opposite of itself. Also, autoantonym is another word. So you have the antonym, which is a word that means the opposite of another word, and auto meaning self, so autoantonym or contronym. So English is so bad with these words. There's like a good dozen, probably more, that where they mean the complete opposite of each other. That it's English is terrible. Language is terrible.
Infamous?
Infamous. Infamous, yeah. Infamous. But English is just horrible with these things. And then here you have Humpty Dumpty saying, oh, this word means exactly what I say. And then he played some other word games with her. He's like, how old did you say you were? Now, normally that's taken to be a question of how old are you? Meaning that you should have brought it up in conversation earlier, but I'm being polite and making, and suggesting that I forgot. And so it's like, oh, so what did you say blah, blah, blah was? Acting like I forgot it, but you didn't give me the information and you should have. And so Alice says, I'm 7.5. Or 7 years and 6 months. 7.5. So, she said, so I'm 7.5. Humpty Dumpty is wrong. You never said. So that's the introduction to Humpty Dumpty here. And that is all about, okay, I am going to be playing word tricks with you, and I am not going to be nice about it. And yeah, he goes on, and he does word tricks, and then he gives his poem. And his poem is kind of madness. Madness in a lot of ways, and one of the most striking parts of the madness in it is that he ends it with but. Now, but is a conjunction. And conjunctions, there's and, or, and but. I mean, English has 3 of them, I think. There might be others, or using other words in weird ways. But the 3 canonical ones are and, or, and but. So you have this and that. This or that. This but that. And so but is A is true, and B is also true, but kind of goes against A. So it's like, okay, I hate to exercise, but I love long walks. And so but says that the 2 things are in opposition, but both of them are true. And so here he was, and he ends like in the middle of a sentence, which is just surreal. But it's surreal, but this is the way it does it. And this is what Wonderland is about. So during the poem, Alice interrupted him 4 or 5 times, saying, oh, blah, 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 hoping that this would be the end. And then he chastises her, rightly. He rightly chastises her for interrupting. He's like, you're throwing me off. You don't really need to interrupt and say these things. And he's right. It's rude. And then he gets to the end. I tried to turn the handle, but. But what? The door didn't open. The handle turned. A leopard locked out and ate me. But what? And so but is a horrendous thing to end. Well, yeah, it kind of is. It doesn't convey information. Or it conveys that information should be gleaned. I do a lot of talking and thinking and ending sentences with ellipses, which follow where there is some thought at the end of the train. And perhaps it's a thought that I'm afraid of saying, or I think will be taken poorly, or that I'm hoping the person will get on their own. Partially because of those other things, and partially because my brain is just scattered everywhere and terrible about it. I'm trying to fix it, but I don't always do it well. So he ends with but. And then Alice sits there politely because, she was chastised and she learned, and learning her lesson is good. And she's like, is that it? Humpty's like, yep, bye. And then they go into another discussion. And the other discussion is, I won't recognize you. All people look the same. And there's a lot of truth to that a lot of people do look the same. And there's some tie-in to racism with this, where if you're only around white people and you see a black person, the black person becomes the black person. And if you meet a second black person, it's hard to distinguish them apart because you just know the one as the black person. Well, if everyone is white around you, just say everyone's white around you, it's like, oh, the guy with the bushy beard. Or if you have a lot of guys with the bushy beard, it's the bushy beard with the gray streak, or the red around the mouth. Or it's the guy with the beard and the ponytail and the glasses. Or the guy with the wild eyebrows. So you start building up all of these little things. But if you only know one Asian, then it's the Asian. Or one black person, it's the black person, or the Hispanic person. And that's one of the great things about living in a society with all sorts of different people. Because you start building up checkboxes of, oh yes, this is... And then you sort it all down. Because, it's like you have to be able to tell people apart. It's like, okay, this is a person with the high cheekbones. This is the person with the scar on the forehead. And you start, you just start building it up. And, you can even start telling identical twins apart. It's like, oh, this is the one that's a little bit taller. Or this is the one that's a little bit heavier. Or this is the one with the slightly darker hair. And you just start picking these things up. But there are times where it's like, when I first moved into town, I had problems telling a bunch of people apart. Because they all looked so much the same to me, because I was used to, okay, these are the 20 black people. These are the 5 black people with short hair. These are the 5 with the braids. These are the 5. And these are the 20 Hispanics. And these are the skinny ones. And these are the ones with the short hair. And these are the white people. And then I had, it's like 20 black, 20 Hispanic, 20 white, 20 Asian. And all of a sudden it was 100 white people. It's like, I don't have enough little categories to break these people down into. Eventually you start learning people, and you learn people and you get guides, but try and keep track of that, because, you're going to meet lots and lots of people who look very similar. And that was something that this kind of started out with Alice. Humpty Dumpty asked her name. It's like, Alice. It's like, that's not a good name. That doesn't mean anything. And not really. Alice is a female Anglophone name. It's not particular. It doesn't particularly indicate much of anything. It doesn't really particularly indicate much of anything. I mean, if you hear the name Maria, it's probably Italian or Hispanic, but that's the rare exception. There are some last names that you can attribute to different races sometimes. There was a movie called Fierce Creatures with John Cleese in it. It was okay. It wasn't particularly good. But one of the gags in the movie was his character's name was Lee. And the guy was from Hong Kong. Now, Li is a very common name in China because it's just a common name in China. And because Hong Kong was being turned over to China back then, there were a lot of Chinese people in it. And so when he was introduced, everybody assumed that he was Chinese. The thing is that Li is also an Anglo name, like Robert E. Lee and Light Horse Harry Lee, who signed the, I think he was one of the signers of the Constitution. Or no, he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was a Virginia delegate. So here you have, Lee, and everyone is, oh, he must be. And it's like, no. And you can't necessarily make those assumptions about names. You can take a guess. If you hear the name Kim, you're going to go looking for a woman, usually. But I know a couple of guys who are named Kim, so that's not necessarily a good fix. But, Alice, it's like, that's not really a good name. Humpty Dumpty is kind of onomatopoetic. No, onomatopoeia is when a word sounds like something. So like zap sounds like a zap, an electrical shock. But Humpty Dumpty is a very round sounding name. The Humpty Dumpty, both very round sounds, which kind of gives you this sort of egg impression. And, it's round sounds and it's a round person. Alice is kind of an angular name, but doesn't really tell you much about it. Because kids are assigned names at birth, it's like, okay, you are going to be called Jim for the rest of your life. You may not look like a Jim, but you are Jim. Anyway, so people get assigned names, and that is their name, and it may not fit. I don't know. Not sure where I'm going with that. Anyway, Humpty Dumpty. Very, 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 very interesting chapter.